Let me ask you another question. When you were here, you were rightly critical, not here actually, I guess it was on Cash's corner. You were rightly critical of the way that the previous FBI director used the FBI jet. And you said you wanted to ground Chris Wray's private jet travel that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country. Let me ask you this. On the weekend of, according to flight tracker data, on the weekend of March 7th, an FBI plane flew round trip from D.C. to Las Vegas, and you attended a UFC fight with Mel Gibson. And I'll show you that. Is that you, and is that true?
Yeah, you want to know the difference? I live in Las Vegas. I'm allowed to go home. I didn't leave a congressional hearing early on an FBI jet to dodge questions.
All right. Then on April 5th, you attended a hockey game in New York City. You don't live there, right?
No, I don't.
By the way, everyday FBI agents who are signed in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet.
Well, this is a great point. Do you know why I have to use a private jet? Because Congress made it mandatory.
Okay. In April 5th, well, we didn't make it mandatory that you go to UFC games with Mel Gibson.
Are you telling me I can't go home?
You got to use some judgment here.
So when I'm at home, I can't do what I'm doing when I go home. Everybody else is allowed to go home, just not me.
Let me keep going. No, I'm glad you go home. I love to go home. But I don't go home on a private jet. On April 5th,
they're not mandated to do so.
You attended a hockey game in New York City with Wayne Gretzky. And Flight Tracker says the FBI jet took you to and from New York City, where you don't live, right?
That's correct.
And on April 12th, on the following weekend, you attended a UFC fight in Miami, also on the FBI jet, right?
That's correct.
So what's the cost to the taxpayer for those 3 flights?
Well, I pay the commercial equivalent per the regs and the law. And so just so you know, when you are comparing me to prior directors...
I asked what the cost was, and you don't know. I take it.
Yeah, and what I've done with the use of the private jet is use Andrews Air Force Base versus Reagan National as what the other directors have done to save the taxpayer dollars.
Bottom line here, you flew home to Las Vegas. There's nobody else in the FBI who gets paid. They have to pay their own way if they want to go home, right? I mean, right?
Well, that's not accurate. Depending on where you're stationed, the FBI covers the bill to get home.
So are you telling me that FBI agents who are signed in Washington, but who may live in Charlotte, they get paid by the FBI to
Sometimes they do, yes.
All right. Another thing I want to say is this. Our local law enforcement has been stiffed. About $500 million in cop grants have been taken out of the budget. Those really help us in Burlington. They help us in Rutland. They really are important. And why in the world would we be cutting those cop grants when we need that local law enforcement, in part to partner with you?
Well, I think
you support that?
I think you're speaking to the Department of Justice grants, which I don't adjudicate, but also Vermont, just like every other state, has received a plus-up of FBI personnel.
Well, I'll tell you, that's not what we're seeing. The other thing, my understanding is that there's a requisition or an effort to get another plane for the FBI that would cost about $72 million. Is that right?
That's inaccurate. The FBI, because the jet, as you call it, is not my jet. We use it for operational needs. We use it for FTOCs. We use it for HRT.
But that's the one you fly in, right?
We have multiple fixed-wing assets, and one of them is on a wildly expensive lease that I deemed a waste of money, and I'm looking for a replacement in which the government can procure assets permanently.
Well, I would welcome you submitting to this committee the cost information about the jets that are under consideration. And according to our research, the specifications that are included in this request would result in an expenditure of between $72 million and $80 million.
That's inaccurate, but I'll happily get you the right numbers.
I welcome getting the specific information.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr.
You just watched Senator Peter Welch press Kash Patel about the FBI's use of a government jet, flights that, according to public flight data, took the director to UFC matches, hockey games, and back to cities where he doesn't live. At the heart of what Senator Welch is doing isn't a cheap political gotcha. It's basic accountability. Who gets to use publicly funded resources, under what rules, and who pays when those rules are stretched.
The second thing that is really important in the FBI, but it's important in every agency, is that the folks who are doing good work get supported for the work they're doing. And a number of highly successful FBI agents have been let go. And I want to just ask you a little bit about that. You know who Brian Driscoll is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is he served at the FBI for over 18 years. You agree?
I believe that's accurate.
Special agent in charge of the Newark office. He was commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team. That's a very prestigious and responsible position. Correct?
It is.
Section chief of the Critical Incident Response Group's tactical section. You've got to be pretty good to get that high responsibility. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
He oversaw 55 SWAT teams, and they're like the elite of the elite, right? They go in to the dangerous situations, right? He got a Medal of Valor for his participation in a raid on ISIS terrorist Abu Sayyaf, who had kidnapped American citizens Kyla Mueller, right? Mueller? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I know.
You're in agreement, right?
I know Kayla Mueller's family. Yes, I know the
Okay,
situation.
and he got Kurt Meyer, somebody who had barricaded himself in a bar after he killed 4 people and wounded 2. And Driscoll was part of the team that went in there and took that guy out, right?
I don't have all the details, but I'll take your word for it, Senator.
And he got into trouble when Emil Bove demanded a list of FBI agents who investigated January 6th and was apprehensive that what did happen ultimately would happen, and that is those folks would get fired. I mean, do you agree with me that a boss who stands up for his subordinates when they did the job that was asked of them is a stand-up person and somebody to be admired?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
Pardon me?
Generally speaking, yes, sir.
But Driscoll got fired, right?
Again, that matter is under litigation, and the matter you referenced occurred before I was
Okay, but
director.
let's just keep it fairly narrow here. He's fired, right?
Yes, he was terminated.
And he has to be, there's somebody communicates to him that he's terminated, correct?
That's my job.
That's your job. So you communicated to him that he was fired.
I did.
So, I have a hard time with this because that record suggests to me that this person is like worthy of consideration for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he got fired.
But there's also a record of other information that was available, and now that this matter is pending litigation, we will get that out in due course. But as
Okay,
you,
so
you can
the
agree.
so-called, so you've got, quote, other information that you see as a valid basis to fire somebody who, from what I can tell, had an absolutely outstanding record and who crossed the threshold of getting in trouble because he was standing up for agents serving under him who did work that was assigned to them that happened to be related to the January 6th uprising.
Again, you're correlating based on your information the reasons for his termination, and I'm telling
No,
you.
that's right.
A few quick facts that matter for understanding why this is more than a soundbite. First, FBI directors historically have access to aircraft for operational reasons, urgent travel, national security matters, and protective logistics. But the practice has also been controversial. Past directors were criticized when their travel looked like personal convenience, and the public expects transparency and reimbursement when travel is personal. That's the policy wrinkle Patel keeps pointing to, that personal travel should be reimbursed. And it's why this isn't simply he flew somewhere. The question is whether the trips were operational or personal, and whether taxpayers were left holding the tab. Watch how Welch builds his case in the exchange. He methodically establishes the record of a long-serving FBI hero who was fired, then pivots to the jet trips, Las Vegas, New York, Miami, outings that look like personal leisure to many viewers. He presses Patel on the fairness of those flights compared with what rank-and-file FBI personnel experience. That line, everyday FBI agents who are assigned in Washington don't get to fly home on a private jet, is the emotional anchor of Welch's point. Public servants on the ground don't receive the perks a director appears to be using. It's a powerful way to translate a technical oversight question into a question about fairness and morale. Now let's unpack the 2 key problems this episode exposes. First, hypocrisy and leadership optics. Patel once criticized previous leadership for jetting off on taxpayer-funded travel. When leaders who publicly condemn a practice then appear to engage in it, it damages credibility. Credibility matters for an agency whose effectiveness depends on public trust and the morale of career agents. If the public sees a pattern of senior officials using scarce resources for personal reasons, it creates cynicism about whether accountability rules apply equally to everyone. Journalistic reporting and flight tracking analyses have documented multiple leisure-oriented trips tied to the director, raising legitimate questions about whether the spirit of the rules was followed even if some paperwork was completed. Second, real budgetary and operational consequences. These are not just abstract ethics questions. Government aircraft cost real money to operate and maintain. When leadership uses operational assets for non-operational travel, two things happen. One, it diverts resources away from mission-critical use. Two, it creates pressure to justify future purchases or leases that are framed as operational necessities but may be used for discretionary travel. That's why Welch pressed Patel about an acquisition reportedly pegged at tens of millions of dollars. Because procurement decisions made in the fog of leadership's convenience can become long-term budgetary commitments borne by taxpayers. Independent reporting has flagged concerns about the cost and frequency of these flights and the decisions surrounding fleet procurement. There's also a personnel question. The transcript you watched references a senior operational official being fired after public flight data surfaced. If true, that raises two troubling possibilities. Either career officials are being scapegoated for exposing practices the leadership endorsed, or the agency is disciplining staff for transparency that public interest demands. Either way, it harms morale and can chill internal reporting. People who see waste or questionable use of assets may be less willing to bring it to light. That's the opposite of what a healthy, apolitical law enforcement culture needs. So, what should people take away beyond outrage? Oversight matters. Congressional oversight isn't partisan theater when it's rooted in documents, flight logs, procurement records, and sworn testimony. This is how a democracy keeps public agencies accountable. Welch's line-by-line unpacking of events is a textbook example of oversight. Establish facts, press for inconsistencies, and demand documentation. AP News policy detail matters. It's not enough to say, don't use the jet. The rules that govern usage, reimbursement, operational necessity, and procurement specifications are the levers that fix behavior. Reform proposals that Democrats and accountability-minded Republicans often support include clearer definitions of permissible travel, mandatory public disclosure of non-operational flights, and caps or limits that prevent routine personal use.